All right, so we all think we know what it means to own property, right? You buy a house, you get the keys, and that's that. But what if I told you it's way more complicated and honestly, a lot more interesting than that?
So let's just jump right in with the big question. When you buy a house, what do you actually own? I mean, is it just the four walls and the roof, the ground it's on? What about the sky above it? This is the puzzle we're going to unpack together.
Because the truth is, it's so much more than just the ground beneath your feet. Property ownership is this incredible, layered idea. And trust me, once you see how these layers work, you are never going to look at a deed the same way again. So, let's get into it.
Okay, to really get this, we've got to get three key terms down. They kind of build on top of each other, like Legos. First up, you've got land. Think of it as the Earth's surface, but it goes all the way down to the center of the planet and all the way up into space. Crazy, right? Then you have real estate. That's the land, plus anything man-made that's stuck to it. You know, the house, the fence, a driveway. But here's the most important one, real property. That's the real estate, the physical stuff, plus all the legal rights of ownership that go along with it.
And that right there is the key. What you really own isn't just the dirt and the drywall. You own a set of legal rights. In the biz, they call this the bundle of rights. And honestly, this invisible bundle, that's where the real power and value is.
So, to make this whole bundle of rights thing a little easier to picture, let's think about it like a three-layer cake. Yeah, a cake. Each layer is a different part of what you own. And here's the wild part. You can slice off each of those layers and sell them to different people.
Let's cut into this cake, shall we? The top layer? Those are your air rights. We're talking about the space above your land, all the way to the heavens. It's why someone can lease out the space for a cell tower on a building, or how you can own a condo that's just, a box of air. The middle layer is what we all think of, surface rights, the right to build your house, plant a garden, that kind of thing. And then the bottom layer, that's the subsurface rights. We're talking oil, gas, minerals, all the valuable stuff hiding underground. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. And kind of dramatic. In places with a ton of natural resources, like Texas for example, there's this major rule. The subsurface estate, so the mineral rights, is legally dominant over the surface estate. So what does that mean? Well, it leads to a pretty wild question. Imagine you buy your absolute dream house, the perfect piece of land, but somebody else owns the mineral rights underneath it. What happens if they decide they want to come drill for oil right there on your property? Yeah, the consequences are pretty intense. Because the subsurface is dominant, you, the person who owns the house, you actually can't stop them. They have the legal right to come onto your land to get to those minerals. A well could pop up just a few hundred feet from your home. And get this, you might not see a single penny from whatever they pull out of the ground. The only real power you have is to negotiate things like where they put the roads or for them to pay for any surface damages. It's a huge, powerful reminder that just because you own the surface doesn't mean you control everything.
Okay, so we've been talking about all this invisible, legal stuff. Let's switch gears and get back to the physical things, the actual stuff you find in a house.
First up, the easy one, personal property. This is basically anything that's not nailed down. Think about everything you'd pack up in a moving truck. Your sofa, the fridge, your books, it's all your stuff. The important thing here is that none of this comes with the house automatically. It has to be written into the contract if you want it to stay. But of course, it gets a little tricky. What happens when you take some personal property and attach it to the house? So think about a ceiling fan. You buy it at the store, it's personal property. But the second you install it, bolting it to the ceiling, it magically transforms. It becomes what's called a fixture, and now it's legally part of the house. That whole process is called annexation. Okay, so this is where the arguments start, right? That beautiful chandelier. Does the seller get to take it, or does it have to stay? Well, the courts have 3 tests to figure this out. The biggest one, the most important one, is intention. Was it put there to be permanent? Next, they look at the method of attachment. Like, how is it stuck on there? Is ripping it out going to cause a bunch of damage? And finally, there's adaptation. Was it custom made for that specific spot, like built-in bookshelves or custom window blinds?
Now, there's always an exception, and this one's a big deal in the business world. It's called a trade fixture. Think about a restaurant. Those giant bolted-down ovens and kitchen hoods, or the chairs in a barbershop. Even though they're attached, they're considered essential for the business. So the business owner, the tenant, gets to take them when their lease is over. They just have to fix any holes they leave behind.
And hey, what about stuff that's actually growing in the ground? Well, the law has a special name for that too. Emblements. This is basically for crops.
So let's say a tenant farmer plants a whole field of corn. If the owner sells the farm before the harvest, that corn still belongs to the farmer who did all the work. The farmer gets to come back and harvest their crop, even with the new owner there.
Believe it or not, this whole personal versus real property thing is super relevant today, especially with factory-built homes. You've got manufactured homes, which are built to one national standard. They actually start out as personal property, kind of like a car, with a title and everything, but they can be legally converted into real property. On the other hand, you have modular homes. These are built in pieces but to local building codes, and they're assembled on site. From day one, a modular home is treated just like a regular house. It's real property.
So what's the big deal with this distinction? Well, the magic year is 1976. That's when the federal government, specifically HUD, stepped in. They created a single national building code for these homes. That moment officially separated the modern, regulated manufactured homes from what people used to call mobile homes, and it gave them a clear legal pathway to become real property just like any other house.
So, when you boil it all down, what have we learned? That owning property is really about two things at once. It's about the physical stuff you can touch, the land, the building, the fixtures. But it's also about that invisible bundle of rights we talked about. And in many ways, that bundle is even more important, because it's what determines what you can actually do with it all.
And that leaves me with one last question for you to chew on. We've talked about the rights to what's under the ground and what's on the surface. But what about the future? As things like renewable energy get bigger and bigger, who owns the wind that blows over your land? Or the sunlight that hits your roof? These are the new frontiers being debated right now, all part of that same ever-changing bundle of rights. It just goes to show you, the question of what we really own is never simple.